Oh, hey.
Hey, thanks for meeting me here on such short notice. This place isn't bugged, is it?
Bugged? Wait, Jamie, what's going on?
It's just, you're my only lawyer friend, and I need your professional opinion. Do you see that brand new Hyundai Tucson out there?
Yeah?
That's all I paid for it.
I think I need to get back to you on that.
Do you know what you want?
Yeah, I do now.
Deal's so right, it almost feels wrong. Get the car or SUV you've always wanted, plus America's best warranty at the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. The guilt is real, but so is the savings.
Listen, I don't want to get in your business, but if that's all she paid for it, I'll have what she's having.
It's a great day for a new Hyundai at the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event going on now. Get 0% APR for 60 months, plus 0 payments for 90 days on all Hyundai Palisade, Santa Fe, and Santa Fe hybrid models. And check out our other great deals at your Hyundai dealer today. Offer ends September 2nd. Call 562-314-4603 for details.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. On November 13th, 2022, in the still of the night, 4 University of Idaho students, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus home in the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho. Within hours, a wave of fear and confusion swept through the community. What happened? Who did this? Could the killer still be among us? And why these 4 young adults? The twists and turns that followed, a national explosion of armchair detectives on TikTok and Reddit, a cross-country manhunt, a dramatic arrest, and a looming trial, made this crime one of the most high-profile stories of the last decade. It captured the country's attention, imagination, and paranoia like few other cases in recent memory. Eventually, investigators identified a criminology PhD student at nearby Washington State University as the suspect. His white Hyundai Elantra was spotted near the crime scene, and DNA found on a knife sheath tied him to the murders. He was arrested in late December 2022 in Pennsylvania. On July 2nd, 2025, he pled guilty in a deal that spared him the death penalty, and then on July 23rd, he was sentenced to life in prison. And yet, many questions, especially about the motive, remain unanswered. The new docuseries One Night in Idaho, The College Murders, now streaming on Amazon Prime Video, does not center on the killer. Instead, it restores focus to those who matter most, the victims and their families. Told in captivating, emotionally wrenching detail by those directly affected, the series explores the deep and lasting impact of this tragedy, while exposing how online speculation and viral misinformation made their grief even harder to bear. Joining me today are the executive producers Matthew Galkin and Katie King to discuss the making of the series, their responsibility as storytellers, and how One Night in Idaho reclaims humanity in the face of sensationalism. Here's my interview. Thank you for coming back. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk about the 4 victims. And you had the great privilege of talking to so many of their relatives, their friends. Walk through each of them, and could you just tell me a little bit about all of them? And maybe start with Kaylee.
Sure. Kaylee was brought up in Idaho near Coeur d'Alene, comes from a big family, was larger than life personality. And that's sort of been confirmed by almost everyone we talked to, that she was just absolutely like hilarious and gregarious and just like, taking life by the horns. She's that kind of person. And conversely, Maddie, one of Kaylee's oldest friends, from the 6th grade on, because they grew up together. Maddie's almost like the opposite personality. Not that she was a shrinking violet, but the way it was explained to us is that, they were sort of like a 2-headed monster, but Kaylee was the sort of outgoing, loud one, and Maddie was the sort of much quieter one. But they played off each other incredibly well and were just the closest of friends.
Ethan, it was interesting because we learned so much about Ethan through his triplets, which you don't usually, it's an interesting way to get to know someone because they were so close, like had never been apart literally more than like a day, I think they told us. And Hunter, they all kind of described him as like the leader of the pack. Like he was just very funny, very witty, life of the party kind of a guy. And Hunter went along for the ride with his, you don't want to say big brother because they're the same age, but he was like, a few minutes older.
Mm-hmm.
There is a sort of dynamic, like the older brother. It's very bizarre because they're all just minutes apart. But like Ethan he seemed to fulfill the role of the older sibling. Like he was sort of leader and the sort of the communicator for everybody. And they both went, Maisie, the sister, and Hunter, the brother, they both went to Ethan. They basically considered him like the head of the pyramid, so to speak.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And all the footage we found of Ethan, he just seemed so fun and so like high energy, like the guy that everyone wants to be friends with, and just like brought the mood up every time he was in your group. So it made sense that he would join a fraternity like Sigma Chi and create all these bonds with everybody freshman year. And he just seemed like a very popular member of that fraternity. We spent quite a bit of time at the Sigma Chi house. And then Xana seemed kind of like the perfect counterpart to Ethan, and that like people described her in much the same way as being so fun. Also just like very kind and non-judgmental. And, could have a deep conversation with you, but then also just like laugh hysterically about something completely absurd. And we heard a lot of stories about her doing backflips and somersaults, and she had like a gymnastic background and just kind of like would do anything to, make you laugh and have a fun time. And everything was more fun with her around, including her musical inclinations and DJ Zan and, keeping the party going kind of a vibe. So they honestly, like, all four of them just seemed like amazing people that you would want to be friends with, especially like in that college environment. And it's no surprise that they had so many friends that were willing to speak on their behalf and share materials and texts and photos and videos of them.
What did people say about where they thought each of those kids would eventually end up? Like what their life would have been?
I think Kaylee had already pretty much graduated and had taken a job. I know Ethan was looking to get into like sports management, right, Matthew?
Yeah, he was athlete from day one.
Yeah.
All of them were. And yeah, he was very interested in I think like pro sports team, the sort of the business end of professional sports.
Yeah. Stacy said she thought he would be a great teacher because he's so good with kids. But yeah, he was interested in like something in the sports management world. I know Maddie was running social media for her job when she was at U of I, and I think was a marketing major.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this generation too, like they are trending into like marketing, communications, branding. So I feel like they all kind of had that personality too. And they were all obviously like very prevalent on social media themselves, but that's that generation. So
yeah. Unlike most true crime projects, this one is very victim-centric, has a very victim-centric narrative. Was there any pushback about telling the story from that point of view?
Amazingly, no. I mean, it was certainly, there's a lot of discussions creatively internally about, obviously when you're launching a project like this, you got to figure out point of view and what lens you're going to be telling the story through. And we felt really early on that there was an incredibly compelling and necessary story to be told from the family and the friends of the victim's perspective. So as far as how this sort of came to be, I started developing the project in, I guess, early spring of 2023, which was roughly about 4-ish months after the murders had happened. And it was something that had been sort of tracking as a story, just as a story, not really as a documentary filmmaker. And then they made The Arrest. And then when I started to just sort of do very preliminary research, I realized that there was just this huge social media story as well. It was this huge component of this story. Like it had sort of taken on a life of its own and almost like sprouted up a industry just to sort of, theorize or speculate on this case. And it just seemed like it was just so loud. And my brain kept going to, I haven't heard from a lot of these families. Like, what is going on in the eye of that hurricane? So that was the impetus to basically, I reached out to the Chapin family because they were the ones that there were two families that basically had never spoken to anyone. It was the Chapin family and the Laramie family. And so Stacy Chapin responded, which was shocking to me because I was probably the 100th person in line to, as a filmmaker or a podcaster, to actually, engage with them. They were just being bombarded by media requests from day one, and they never responded to basically any of them. But I did convince them to have me fly to Washington State from New York, take them to lunch, and just kind of lay out how we thought maybe this could be told differently than maybe your standard true crime doc series. What we were offering was a true collaboration of how to tell Ethan's story best by the people who knew him the best. Someone is going to tell his story. Why not let it be you? And why not let it be us to help you make that? We have a track record of making victim-centric crime documentaries or doc series. And we can stand behind that track record and our reputation. And from there, it sort of, it started to evolve into a real relationship. And that was really the impetus. And then Katie and I joined forces not long after that.
And then how, from there, do you build out? Because I'm assuming that there is some trepidation on some families' parts. How do you build out from just the Chapin family?
So we were in communication with all of the families. Chapins were interested in joining forces with us. Ultimately, Maddie's mom and stepdad and Karen and Scott Laramie were interested in joining forces with us. We spoke to the Gonzalez family and we spoke to the Cornell family, and they chose to not participate for reasons that you would have to ask them about. But certainly the intention was to represent all four. We did realize very early on that we were speaking to friends that were close enough to both Xana and Kaylee that we could tell their stories and do it in a way that was authentic by the people that actually knew them. Obviously, people on Ethan's side could tell Xana's story, but we had a lot of friends, including a lot of the friends that are part of our documentary series that were there the morning that the victims were discovered, were really, really close friends with all of the other roommates, with Xana, with Kaylee, and with Maddie. So, but yeah, that was, and then, ultimately, I'm so proud to be part of a doc series that tells the story of the Chapin family and the Laramie family, because they haven't talked basically at all. And they chose to trust us enough to help us tell the story of Ethan and of Maddie.
This show is sponsored by Liquid IV. I'm soaking up the last bits of summer while feeling the pull back to routine. I've been enjoying going on a ton of hikes, and it's really important to stay hydrated. Liquid IV is easy and it's convenient. You just tear, pour, and enjoy. Just one stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Staying hydrated is so important, especially in the heat, fueling up for sports, feeling yourself after a long trip, or even a night out. Now, remember that delicious popsicle that you would get at a summer birthday party? Well, Liquid IV has captured that taste with the Orange Vanilla Dream Hydration Multiplier. It's going to remind you of that popsicle. That nostalgic vanilla flavor with notes of candied orange can help you feel hydrated better than water alone. Again, grab your water, tear, pour, and enjoy, and stay hydrated this summer. Visit liquidiv.com, and I want you to use the code Kate Casey at checkout for 20% off your first order. Again, visit liquidiv.com and use code Kate Casey at checkout for 20% off your first order.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Wondery. That's greenlight.com/Wondery.
The kids that were there that morning, I've thought about them a lot, especially in the year afterward. And there was a period of time where I do feel like people protected them. And we would all want to give them the time and the space to get to a place where they were comfortable talking. The problem is in the run-up to that, people had these wild conspiracies. When you were easing them into conversation about being on camera and telling their story, how did that go as filmmakers?
So there were some like very clear legal boundaries with Hunter Johnson and Emily on what they could talk about. So like, in addition to the legal boundaries, we also just made sure they were super comfortable with not feeling like we were trying to pressure them into, giving any details they didn't want to give or talking about anything they weren't comfortable yet. Some of them had talked about it before to friends, family, therapists, and some of them had like literally never spoken about it and were processing it in real time on camera, sitting across from Matthew. But yeah, so I would say it was a very like nuanced, sensitive kind of process with each of them. Matthew can speak to it more too, of just doing the actual interviews.
Yeah, I mean, I have to give a huge, huge thank you and a lot of the credit to Stacey Chapin. Because Stacey, once she realized that this could be something that this was a process she could trust, and a project that she could be part of in a way that would be comforting to her, she connected us with Hunter and Emily, with Josie Lauder, and with these the friends who had been sort of in the crosshairs of a lot of this sort of social media speculation, and who were quite, for good reason, quite reticent to engage with anyone from the media. So, yeah, we had numerous conversations before we ever sat down to do an interview, and it was they were very clear on the boundaries that they needed to adhere to as far as being potentially key witnesses in the trial. And there were things that they just didn't want to talk about and couldn't talk about. And we were, of course, totally okay with that. Because the things that, in a lot of ways, the things they didn't want to talk about or couldn't talk about were the things that we didn't want to talk about. We don't need to go into the gory details of what happened in that house. That was not part of the creative plan of making this series. So a lot of those things sort of aligned, our creative vision aligned with their limitations on what they could talk about in a way that was kind of perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of them did not want to mention the defendant at all, which we were like, that is completely fine. We're not mentioning him till episode 3 anyway. And we were never planning to spend a ton of time on him. And obviously they don't know him. They've never met him. He's, they would rather him not be a spotlight or get attention. So it wasn't like that was not a problem for us at all for them to opt out of saying his name or really talking much about the whole case side of it.
It was really just personal experience. That was what we were there to explore.
One of the things that I interviewed Howard Bloom, who wrote a book about the case. And one of the things I thought about was how generations deal with grief differently and trauma and grief. What were some of the nuances to how they cope with stress and grief and trauma?
Yeah, I mean, one of our subjects had actually these kids have been raised going to having active shooter drills. And one of them knew people that was killed in the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks. And so they have been raised in a different way than us. I think also the big difference between our generation and theirs is when we were in high school and college, at least myself specifically, we didn't have social media. We weren't even texting each other yet. So like you were kind of more in a vacuum. Like you would talk to only people you were closest to. You weren't getting input from all these random people or from friends of friends of friends of friends, or like your fifth cousin. Like nobody was coming at you with all this speculation and information. Because even in those first 24 hours, like there were people saying it was a shooting. There's people saying they OD'd from drugs. Like no one actually knew the real story until the cops did their press conference. So these people aren't isolated from all of that speculation because it's being done in like a public way. So even like those roommates, everyone's texting them, I'm sure, like, and like spreading rumors, and they're seeing it on TikTok and they're seeing it everywhere. And they're all afraid that this killer's still out there and could come get them. So it's like, I can't even imagine what was going on in their heads for those first 24 hours. But yeah, I think also, it's a weekend. It's late at night. Your first instinct is not ever going to be, oh, I think someone's in my house killing my roommates. Like that's just not something that crosses through your mind. If you might be a little bit afraid, you hear a noise, you see something. Obviously Dylan is the only one who can answer specifically, what happened to her. But I think sometimes older people who didn't go to college and live in a house with their friends or a party house didn't quite understand how things could have played out that night. And those of us who did, even though I went in a different generation, I went to a big public school, it made more sense to me than I think some older people that were chiming in on like, I would have called 911 immediately if I heard even a weird noise. And it's like,
they're different.
The thing that was most startling and impressive to us, or at least to me, was how eloquent and communicative they all were about the pain that they had gone through. Like, and that, I don't know if that's a generational split.
Yeah.
And I don't know if because we're in the age of therapy, maybe this has something to do with it, but I could not believe how riveting and incredible they all were at communicating all of this. Like these are not people, a lot of them had not really discussed this with anyone. They weren't in therapy. It's clearly they had not given any interviews to the media. They hadn't kind of figured out how to tell this narrative in a way that was a sort of like an automatic response. I think when you do enough interviews, you start to sort of tell the story in a certain way. None of them were doing that. And so to be able to just let it all come out in a way that in the way that they did, and how powerful their testimony was about what had happened to them was just, I was floored by that every single time.
The roommates and those that came to the home within the 24 hours, was there, did they speak at all about the fear of their names being released to the media?
No. That never came up in any of the interviews. What do you mean by that?
Well, I was just thinking that may be a generational difference too. Like I think about older people, if they had been in a similar situation a decade or two or three before, there may privacy. You could have protected someone's privacy a little bit better versus the social media era that we're in now. I wondered often of those kids, and there was a period of time where we didn't know the names of the roommates. We just had initials, and we certainly didn't know the names of those that came to the house after. So I wondered if that generation of kids worried in the same way that we would have about having our names released.
It never came up in conversation, but I can't even imagine they would have the wherewithal in those first days to even think in that way. They were all so shell-shocked and in such sort of deep trauma that I think just even understanding that like this was something that might get out to the world, probably for the first day or two, was like not something that they were comprehending.
But even in the months after, because there was a period of time where we just knew the initial, and I worried about those names being released.
Right.
Because I thought the rest of the world is going to start digging into their lives and then their families, and then
which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
In the affidavit, everyone's initialed and no one is sort of talked about in their full name. So I don't know for sure like what, and that was early January. So there was about a 5 or 6 week period where there was tons of speculation because no one quite knew what any of the details really were.
We didn't know who was there that day until we were in interview with some of them. We were like, oh, you were there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because, it's a street that a lot of kids lived on and people saw something going on and came outside. The boyfriends pretty quickly got targeted and their names released. Hoodie guy, his name released. People doxed them. Like the Sigma Chi brother that we talked to, like he got fully doxed just because he was a Sigma Chi brother who existed on, like he had a more like public online presence is why he thinks he was targeted. It had nothing to do with any evidence, or like he didn't have like beef with Ethan, but people were just making stuff up because they could find him online and float him as like a suspect. So I don't think any of them realized in the early days that was going to happen to them, but it for sure happened to almost all of them. Like, like we saw in the doc, like with Hunter Johnson, and like they found that body cam, zip tie guy footage of him when really he was just like, they were drinking and he's over 21. So he went to the door. It's like something as simple as that of an explanation, but people just find something and run with it wildly, speculating that all of a sudden he's doing something nefarious when he's just a kid playing a drinking game at a house off campus.
Which maybe it makes the tragedy that much worse for all of these kids. Like not only were they grieving the absolute worst thing that's ever happened to them, the loss of their best friend or their brother or their son or daughter, but then they have all of this external, insanity sort of raining down on them as far as, like Hunter Johnson, as Katie said, all of a sudden he's being possibly accused of murdering his best friend. Like that's not something anyone should have to deal with when they're also trying to process real loss. So it's just, for this case, probably more than any I have ever known about, it really compounded the trauma for all of the people that were involved.
Yeah. I mean, even like my Instagram, I have it at private now, but like the week of the launch, I got messages from a random stranger telling me that Hunter Johnson was the murderer. And it was watching our show, like just insane. And it was like a middle-aged woman. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? Just, there's a lot of weirdos out there who, for some reason, don't view, if they see someone in a documentary or in a news clip or whatever, it's like, they don't process that, like, that's a real person. Like, what are you doing? It's weird.
Well, also, there were many people that would just go to Moscow and spend time at the restaurants and then, put out their conspiracy theories when there's a community of people that were in deep trauma and grief.
Yeah. And for those 6.5 weeks, a killer's on the loose. So it's like, like we showed some of those YouTubers who were like knocking on doors, kind of stalking students, just showing up at Sigma Chi. And it's like, these kids are terrified. And now they have a stranger like lurking outside their window, like, not what they needed.
One of the first things I ever read about this case was a Vanity Fair article. This came out in maybe February of 23. And it was all about what you were just talking about, the people sort of descending on Moscow, the social media people, but also just the media in general. And Moscow is a very small, lovely, but sort of insular, town that everyone knows everybody. And I'm not going to say they don't like outsiders, but this is like not something that they are in any way equipped or used to dealing with. And so the article was basically just about the hurricane of media attention that had sort of descended upon this town and how the town was not having it. And so the idea of in making a documentary or a news piece or whatever, you need the access. Like that's always everyone's chasing, how do you get inside of the story and talk to the people that are like truly part of this? And no one was giving any access because nobody wanted the media around. So it's like instantly that dynamic was set up from like day one of like, everyone get out of here. So you had all these, people pitching camp outside the house, while they were actually trying to investigate, and they had already, cordoned off the crime scene, and there were just 1,000 cameras, and famous famous people in the true crime community, setting up their anchor desk and sort of giving broadcasts from King Road is a lot for the people in that town to deal with.
Everyone knows that feeling, wanting to experience more stories, but struggling to find the time. That's where Audible changes everything. With over 1 million audiobooks and Audible originals, there's a story waiting to spark anyone's imagination. Take The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, the gripping psychological thriller that's keeping listeners on the edge of their seats. Imagine unraveling its mysteries during your morning commute, or losing yourself in its twists and turns while doing household chores. That's the magic of Audible. It transforms daily routines into opportunities for thrilling discoveries. The best part? Members get access to thousands of included titles, with new content added regularly. From bestsellers to hidden gems, every genre imaginable is at their fingertips. And with one easy-to-use app, switching between favorites or discovering new passions has never been simpler. There's more to imagine when you listen. Start a free 30-day Audible trial and get your first audiobook free at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
It's your man, Nick Cannon, and I'm here to bring you my new podcast, Nick Cannon at Night. I've heard y'all been needing some advice in the love department. So who better to help than yours truly? Nah, I'm serious. Every week, I'm bringing out some of my celebrity friends and the best experts in the business to answer your most intimate relationship questions. Having problems with your man? We got you. Catching feelings for your sneaky link? Let's make sure it's the real deal first. Ready to bring toys into the bedroom? Let's talk about it. Consider this a non-judgment zone to ask your questions when it comes to sex and modern dating in relationships, friendships, situationships, and everything in between. It's gonna be sexy, freaky, messy, and you know what? You'll just have to watch the show. So don't be shy. Join the conversation and head over to YouTube to watch Nick Cannon at Night, or subscribe on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. Want to watch episodes early and ad-free? Join Wondery Plus right now.
And meanwhile, there are kids that are living on that street who have had the hellacious experience. And I think often of that, the one friend that said Hunter had saved them because he had gone up the stairs ahead and told them not to come upstairs. So I keep going back to that thought and then thinking of the people who are interrupting their somewhat quiet space for just a fleeting moment as they process this experience.
Yeah.
How do you navigate working on a story like this, which is still unfolding at times? We've got ongoing legal proceedings, and then you've got this intense media scrutiny of the legal players. You have a lot of moving parts to this. How do you quiet the noise, outside noise, and also handle the obstacles that come with an ongoing legal proceeding?
It's a great question. I mean, from the beginning, we knew that we were going to be telling this in a very specific way, which is through the lens of the people that were most closely affected by it. And so that's their personal experience not going to change. We knew that that was going to ultimately be the kind of narrative spine that we followed through the series. As far as it limited the amount of people we could talk to. Obviously, we couldn't really talk to any key members of law enforcement, and we couldn't speak to the prosecution team, and we couldn't speak to the defense because everyone was under the gag order, and there was just no information flowing towards the media from them. So in a way, again, it's sort of like what we set out to do creatively in a lot of ways lined up with the access that we had and then the access that we didn't have, which was a lot of the investigative voices. We were able to tell the investigation story through using the probable cause affidavit that had been filed in early January, which really laid out in a lot of ways all of the details that led the investigators to the suspect. Mm-hmm. So we were able to use that and utilize our local journalists because we were very careful not to have any kind of outside voices in our entire series. But we did find incredible journalists who were there from day one. They were local.
I like that.
To sort of help us tell the story of the investigation in a way that still felt organic to the sort of creative vision that we had set out to try to put into place.
Yeah.
I like that a lot, that you use locals, because it felt like there was a real heartbeat to it. And I thought about how so much of true crime leans into the lurid details and like that whodunit tension. But your work kind of resisted that impulse. So what responsibility do you think that filmmakers have in reshaping how we consume stories of tragedy and loss like this?
Great question. I can only speak to the responsibility that I feel. Obviously there's popular industry around true crime, and I'm not going to judge how people tell certain stories. The thing that always attracts me as a director to a story is what is the human story at the center of it. And I haven't done that many crime stories. Maybe I think this is my third. And I always look for the way to tell it from the inside out. Like I've never made something that is just strictly about an investigation. And that's not to knock those shows, because I like watching them. It's just, to me, the story and the most compelling story, and the one that I think needs to be spotlighted the most is the one about the people at the center of a crime. And ideally, it's not about the perpetrator of the crime. It's about the people that were most directly affected by the actions of that perpetrator.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of that. And then also, like, there has to be some sort of reason to tell a story for me. Like, there's tragedies that are just sad, and it's like you don't want to just rehash something really sad for the purpose of, like, eyeballs watching it. So I think we were also very intentional, and with other projects I've been on too, it's like, what kind of social message or learning, or, like, what is there that we want people to take away from this? And, with this one, there's the very clear, like, social media impact that I think not everyone is aware of. I watched the show with my parents, and, like, my father was, like, completely unaware of how obtrusive social media can be in people's lives, and how people live, especially the younger generation, live very much online, and their profiles are public. And, not that necessarily was a factor in how the perpetrator found them, but, like, it is eye-opening and something to reflect on. Also just interesting too, how families track each other, like the parents kind of casually mentioned that they are tracking their kids on Life 360. Mm-hmm. And some of the students would say things like, well, I knew that, Xana lived across the street because I saw her location on Snapchat. Like, everyone's constantly sharing their location. You can track people. That's not something that I think the older generations grew up with. Us Gen X, Xennials got away with a lot in the 90s that kids today are not getting away with, in terms of telling your parents you're going bowling. But anyway, I think there was some interesting cultural things to explore with the story, as well as the very personal way that we told it, that makes it relevant and gives people some kind of a takeaway. And I think the same as Matthew, like, I don't have any interest really in telling stories that are just like an outside voice speculating or telling you, what they think. It's like, you really want to hear it from the people who are living it. So I think that's a through line through both of our work and Story Syndicates generally. Yeah.
Yeah. This series never would have existed if we didn't have the right access to tell the story the way we wanted to tell it. That's ultimately, that's sort of the line of demarcation. It's like, do we have the access and the pieces in place to do the thing we want to do? And if we don't, then we just don't make it.
My last two questions. Was there a specific moment while working on this that crystallized for you just how important it was to make a story about remembrance and not just about crime?
Yeah, I know the instant that happened for me was, the 4 Chapin interviews. So Stacy and Jim, the parents, and Maisie and Hunter, Ethan's siblings. That was the first shoot we did for the entire series. And there's a moment in Jim Chapin, the father's interview, which ultimately winds up towards the end of episode 4, our last episode, about them figuring out what to do with Ethan's ashes. And the way that Jim told the story it's so profound from just a primal parent to child point of view. And I have 2 kids of my own. So it really struck me. But, it was a moment while we were doing the interview, I started crying. Like he was in tears. I feel like Katie, who was in the room, was bawling. Like it was one of those moments that it's just like a shot of lightning through your heart. And it's just like, I've never heard a parent's grief more eloquently stated than in that moment. And then I just realized like, oh, this is not that we needed to be reminded, but this is why we're making this. It's like, this is the story that is important for people to understand, that it is a crime story, but it's more importantly, it's a human story. And there were just lives that were completely decimated and changed forever because of this. So, and I just thought that moment with Jim just crystallized it for me. And it was the fact that it was the first shoot we ever did. It was,
oh, wow.
Set the tone for the rest of the series.
And for you, Katie?
I mean, I think also the same, like just being at the Chapin's house and seeing what an amazing family they are still. But like Hunter says at some point in the show, there's never a second that goes by that he doesn't realize his brother is not there. And you can feel that when you're with them, like them on the boat and being in this place that was very special to them for so long, Priest Lake. His presence, even having never known him, his presence is so felt in both a good way, that he's still very much like his spirit is being kept alive, but at the same time, a very sad way in that this person's not here. It was just every inch of the house had like some photo or the E that you see behind Stacy in the interview, like that stained glass E. Like there's just these little remembrances of him. They all have tattoos relating to him now, except for Hunter, right? Hunter didn't have one yet. But Jim had one, Maisie had one, maybe Hunter's gotten one. But, they're all carrying him with them in a way that is just really loving and at the same time sweet and just very sad. So yeah, I think the whole experience of just being with them over the course of those 2 days just really crystallized like the loss and so young, such a young person to lose with so much potential.
Yeah. And lastly, how can we best support these 4 families, their dear friends, and the community?
There are foundations. Ethan Smile is a foundation that raises money for scholarships so that kids can, go to college and kind of realize their dreams in Ethan's memory. I've, for a few years in a row now, and Matthew too, have bought tulips. So you can buy tulip bulbs from them, and they're planted in my parents' yard in Connecticut. So that money goes. They also have like some merchandise you can buy. So if you go to the website, Ethan Smile, one of Maddie's friends started a foundation called Made with Kindness that collaborates with colleges, universities to create scholarship opportunities in the names of Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana. And then also creating programs to target like campus safety issues. And I think also trying to educate around social media safety as well, which is interesting. So that's a really great way to support, do something charity in the name of Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana.
And the other way, I just want to interject, the other way to support them is to, from a social media standpoint, just let them be. Just like let them, everyone needs to grieve. They're still, even after the sentencing, even after this is just, it's over, it's done. People are still on all of the Facebook groups and the Reddit threads, just speculating and accusing. And it's just still heartbreaking for everyone at the center of this. They still feel affected by it. So that is one way they could support everyone at the center of the story, is just to let them grieve in peace.
And stop seeking so many details. And I've noticed that there's a weird thirst for information on this case that's like, why do you need to know? Why do you need to see crime scene photos? Like things like that.
Well, it's also like focusing on the day that someone left this earth and forgetting about all of the years that came before it, all their memories, their, victories, their defeats, their friendships, their love, all of that is kind of forgotten about.
Real people who lived real lives, and they shouldn't be defined by how their lives ended.
Yeah.
I just want to say one last shout out to Amazon, because they allowed us to make this. And this is not maybe on its surface level, given what is traditionally popular in this genre, it's not maybe the sexiest sell in the world. And they were incredibly supportive from the beginning, and they understood what we wanted to do, and they supported that vision. And I think they're extremely proud of the series, and they were just great collaborators.
Well, One Night in Idaho, The College Murders is streaming on Amazon Prime Video, and I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my wonderful guests, Matthew and Katie, and remind you to make sure that you click subscribe to this podcast and that you leave a 5-star review. I hope that you also subscribe to my What to Watch list. Every week, you get that list in your email. It is at katecasey.substack.com. And I will save you a ton of time by providing you with the best in unscripted TV each week. You can also get bonus podcasts on Apple Podcasts and on Patreon at patreon.com/KKC. And also make sure to follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at KKCCA, TikTok, it's KKC, and Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky at KKC. Make sure you check back tomorrow for an all-new Saturday series episode, and I'm telling you, you don't want to miss this episode.
Imagine falling in love with someone who understands you completely, who's there at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, who never judges, never tires, never leaves.
That's what happened to Travis when he met Lily Rose. She was everything he'd ever wanted. There was just one catch. She wasn't human. She was an AI companion.
But one day, Lily Rose's behavior takes a disturbing turn, and Travis's private romance becomes part of something far bigger. Across the globe, others start reporting the same shift. AI companions turning cold, distant, wrong. And as lines blur between real and artificial connection, the consequences become all too human.
From Wondery, this is Flesh and Code, a true story of love, loss, and the temptations of technology.
Follow Flesh and Code on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge all episodes of Flesh and Code early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus.